Alright guys, so this is the surface planer. The primary purpose of this machine is to change the thickness of your wood to exactly what you need it to be. It can also, as you're doing that, you might have a piece of wood that might have something that's rough sawn, it might look ugly, might not be perfectly flat, and it can get rid of a lot of those things as it cuts down through it to the correct thickness. So mainly to get it to whatever thickness you need, but a lot of times it ends up making things look a lot nicer as you go through it. So that's what we're going to use this machine for, but some things that I need you to be paying attention to when you use this. As always, I want to make sure we focus on the primary ways we can get hurt so we know how to avoid them. So with all of these machines, you know there is a blade of some sort. We should never just stick our hand into it. So in this case, this one is going to be on the top portion of this in the middle. There's kind of two rollers on either side, but then there's the helical blade that has a bunch of those square knives at a spiral the whole way around it. So it's a very large cylinder going the whole way across that if we ever were to stick our hand underneath here, it could potentially pull our hand in and start to cut it. So we always want to keep our distance, never stick our fingers underneath the head of this machine. But more realistically, you want to be looking out for pinch points. So when you stick a piece of wood into this machine, it's going to pull it from your hand when you start to push it, and it's just going to suck it in. If you happen to have your fingers underneath your wood, there's a chance that it's going to start to suck it in and smash your fingers down onto the table. We really want to avoid that, so in order to make sure that doesn't happen, we always want to keep our hands on top and kind of push that way to make sure there's no chance of getting hurt. Beyond that, the other thing that you should look out for is if you ever happen to push a piece of wood through, you should always try to make sure you don't have any defects, particularly knots, in your wood when you get to this stage, because what can happen is there can be kickback on this machine. It's nothing like a table saw where it can shoot back at full force and like put a dent in the wall behind you. But if your board can kind of disintegrate and kind of get mulched in a sense, definite parts of it can get shot out and can hit you. So like with all kickback, if you try to stand to the side of the machine as you push it in and stay to the side, you're going to make sure you're at a safe spot. But beyond that even, if you just make sure the wood that you're putting in the machine is free of defects, you're also doing a good job of preventing that. So those two things primarily of keeping your hands, be aware of pinch points and pushing from the top, and making sure that we are aware that defects such as knots can cause kickback, so we should stand on the side, are the two primary ways. And as always, let's keep our fingers away from the blade. Beyond the big points of safety, as always, I want to go over a little bit more technique and some of the smaller safety things that we should be aware of to make sure that when you push something through here, you get the best results. So, that being said, first thing you should be aware of and do when you use this machine is you want to make sure you have a measurement, an accurate measurement of the thickness of your wood. So you should take a ruler, and I'm not talking about the width, I'm not talking about the length, I'm talking about the thickness of your wood. So if you take a look at it, you're going to want to make sure you figure that out. So to the closest 16th of an inch, as close as we can figure that out, we're going to want to take a look. So in this case, my wood is about 7/8 thick. What that means is, the very first part of using this machine is we want to set the machine to about 7/8 thick. If it is set way less than that, it's going to not even be able to enter into the machine. It's going to run into it. And if it's way too big, it's not going to cut anything. So we need to be in charge of getting that set correctly. So in order to do that, right here on the side of the machine, we have a digital readout that will give us a decimal of exactly what the measurement should be. We also have the old school ruler right here that has centimeters and inches on the side of it. I like to use the decimal readout because it's very clear. The only problem is we've been looking at a ruler that has fractions in a 16th. So in order to convert that, on top of the machine, I have an enlarged version of a ruler with each one of the markings on the ruler has the fraction and the decimal equivalent of that fraction. So if you want to know what 15/16 is, you can see that right here it is 0.9375. So that is going to be something that you can use to your advantage. So in this case, if I have 7/8, it's 0.875. I would adjust this by rotating this hand wheel, and I'm going to get it set to about 0.875. It's okay if it's off by a thousandth or so. We just want to get close. At this point, we're now ready to kind of start using this machine. It's in the approximate ballpark. Couple things to keep in mind when you're thinking about the wood you push through this. There are certain limitations on how small what you put in here is. So that being said, you never ever should put something less than 10 inches through this machine. If it's too short, what happens is there's 2 roller bars on the inside of this, and if it can't reach from the first to the second one, it's going to end up lifting up off of the table while it's getting cut and get mulched. So it has to be long enough to extend from the first roller bar to the second, otherwise we're going to have problems. If you ever ended up cutting something at a very thin thickness, the only way that you could do that safely is if you had a backing board underneath it to help support it. So in that very rare chance that you might be wanting to do something like that, check in with one of the teachers and we'll help make sure you have a jig to help make sure that that's going to come through safely. But for the most part, we want to try to avoid cutting things down to a very thin thickness. But there's not really a width requirement on this one. It could be pretty skinny with the width as well. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to make sure that you don't stick something in that's really, really short. But once you have your piece of wood, you've looked at it, there's not many knots or any defects on it, what you're going to want to do for the best results is your piece of wood, you're going to stick it down here. We're not going to stick our hand under it. You want to slightly tilt the piece of wood at an angle and then push it into the machine. That's going to help it grab it easily. If you don't do that, what's probably going to happen is the wood's going to get stuck here at the beginning. It tends to get stuck and the back just lifts up a little bit and then you are like, oh shoot. All right? If that happens and you forgot to twist it, you can push down on the wood a little bit towards the back and it might suck it in. If when you push it down, nothing happens, what I want you to do is just turn off the machine, and once the blades have completely stopped, we'll loosen it and make it wider so that we can pull it back out and try again. So please make sure you're aware of that's how you should handle that. But best case scenario, turn it just a little bit, not extreme, just a little bit, and that will help it go right through. Once you push this through and it sucks it through the other side, you're going to see that it's going to have cleaned it up a little bit. In this case, this is a really screwed up board. But once you stick it through, you're going to bring it back to our in-feed side of the table, and you're going to want to adjust the machine. If you didn't touch anything and you pushed it through again, nothing would happen because it already cut it to that amount. In this case, we would want to rotate it about a full rotation here, and that's going to be about a 1/16 of an inch, give or take a little bit. And then we would push it through again. If you were cutting a normal piece of wood, there would not be all of these defects. I'd highly recommend that you flip it end to end each time. That way it's kind of cleaning up and smoothing out each one, making it perfectly parallel. But in this case, since this is really jacked up, I'm going to really focus just on this side. If you are experiencing problems beyond if it just gets stuck at the very beginning, I never, ever, ever, ever want you guys to force it through the machine. That's a great way to really mess up the alignment and the blades, stall everything, and put you in danger of just breaking something, having it fly out. So never force it into the machine. Only ever try to push it down if it gets stuck at that very initial roller bar. Also, if it seems to get stuck underneath it and it's not coming out on the other side, never reach underneath there. That's where our blade is. That's where the roller bars are. Just turn off the machine, wait till it stops, and then loosen it up so that you could, once the blade's off and there's plenty of clearance, safely pull it back out. Or, better yet, come get the teacher and have them inspect it as well. As it's cutting, whether it's stuck or flowing perfectly through, never, ever end up standing and looking at it at eye level. There can be kickback, there can be parts. You don't want to, even if you're wearing safety glasses, to have that fly out and hit you in the head that could end up being very hurtful. This machine, just like the jointer, grain direction matters. So in other words, if you look at a piece of wood, in this case, this tree, it grew in this direction, all right? If you were to want to cut this, you should always cut it in that same direction that the tree grew. So it would go through the machine just like that. There, the tree, the roots would be this way, and the top of the tree would be over here. If you put it in sideways, it is going to end up cutting against the grain, and it's going to give you a really rough cut, or it could end up kind of breaking your wood. So there's a much more large chance of things getting screwed up. So we always want it to go with the grain to make sure that way it's going to give you a clean, smooth cut. This machine isn't super loud, but you do want to be aware that a lot of times people can forget when we have all of the other equipment and air handling on that it's on. Make sure you turn it off so that way the next person can use it safely. Lastly, when it comes to looking at the parts of these machines, we just want to make sure, as always, we know what things are so that we can identify them if we need to talk about them. So, we have the on and off. Once again, the green is going to be inset, so you have to be intentional to push it. The red sticking out as a button, so it's easy to slap in case something goes wrong. Quick note about that, make sure you push the green button hard. If you just lightly tap it, it can make a really loud noise in here because it doesn't fully engage, so make sure you push the button hard. Other than that, we have an in-feed table and an out-feed table of this whole system. We have the elevation hand wheel right here, so as we adjust this, this will change the thickness of it. We have the digital depth scale, the readout right here to tell us exactly what our measurement is. We have just the base that's just going to bring it up so it's at an appropriate height for us. This entire top section is hooked up to our dust collection. It is going to be called our chip guard because all of this gets mulched and sucked up out of here, so all of the chips are protected by this piece right here. And lastly, if you're ever cutting long stock, up on top of this, we also have what we call the return stock rollers. And these are going to allow you, if you had something cut, you could roll it right back on top and have somebody else push it through. That way you can keep things moving. But that's it. That is the planer. Please use it safely, follow these rules, and it should work great for you.